Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. You guys are crazy. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm touched. Folks, welcome to the Adam Friedland Show. I'm your host, Adam Friedland. Let's do the news. The Boston Marathon just wrapped up, and without incident, it's hard to believe it's already been 10 years since the tragic bombing that resulted in the deaths of at least 4 or 5 Mark Wahlberg movies at the box office. The marathon is, of course, famous for being the one time a year in Massachusetts where the words Boston and race can appear in a sentence without immediately being followed by or. And who won the marathon, you may ask? Well, do I even have to tell you? A Kenyan, of course. Losing every single year to an African must really sting for the world's most racist city. And frankly, it seems a bit unfair. You don't see a bunch of translucent Southie going to Kenya to participate in a skin cancer contest now, do you? Which is ironic, because I think the guy that won the Boston Marathon this year was named Melanoma. The CEO of Herman Miller is under fire after yelling at employees on a Zoom call, lambasting them for worrying about their bonuses after she herself took $1 million in bonuses. This really looks bad for Herman Miller, a company that makes office chairs for rich ass sit around playing executive on. And I'm sure they'll never sell another $5,000 chair again. The Justice Department has accused New York City residents of running a secret Chinese police department controlled by Beijing. The so-called police officers were tasked with silencing critics of the Chinese Communist Party through intimidation and monitoring, which is, of course, exactly what our police do, except style. Many are calling it a real-life police story, but this rumble in the Bronx is certainly no tuxedo. I certainly hope we rush our police officers up there to shang on their high till noon. Bed Bath & Beyond has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, which is bad news if you're trying to buy a Snuggie in 2023, and wonderful news if you're the guy that thought Beyond meant you're allowed to into the display curry. Both Tucker Carlson and Don Lemon have been fired by their respective media employers. With any luck, the two will team up to start a new show where they each other's. Beloved comedian Richard Lewis and co-star of the show Curb Your Enthusiasm has announced that he has been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Good. President Biden's approval rating among young Americans has dropped to a new low of 36%. When told of his declining popularity with young people, the president said, "I didn't get it. I've tried everything. Smelling them, touching them, getting closer to them, kissing their necks, touching them on reaching around and touching their developing and controversy of the Putin-run version of Amazon. Female employees of the Russian online retailer Wildberries have accused the company of mandating strip searches. Employees were dismayed, thinking that Wildberries was the only Russian business that doesn't involve getting on camera. A giant animatronic dragon caught fire during a show at Disneyland this weekend. After clearing Donald and Goofy of wrongdoing, the police discovered the dragon self-immolated in protest of the $35 souvenir cups. In the ongoing blue check Twitter controversy, the museum at Auschwitz-Birkenau death camp clarified it to its followers that it never paid for Twitter Blue. And Nick, I refuse to read the rest of this joke. Hunter Biden may be hiding out in the White House to avoid a subpoena sent by the mother of his child. It seems the hunter has become the hunted. The NYPD rolled out a new line of crime-fighting subway robots that resemble R2-D2. In response, criminals have rolled out train that talk like C-3PO. You know, they're both from Star Wars. Yeah. The manslaughter charges against actor Alec Baldwin have been dropped, and he has returned to the set of Rust, where he famously murdered the film's cinematographer in a premeditated act outlined on a 78-page manifesto. The actor said, "I'm so happy this is all cleared up so I can get back to doing what I love, shooting and killing women." And finally, an Australian jockey has fallen off his horse and died, and no one cares. Okay, guys, we got a great show for you today.
Okay, so we'll pick up here.
Okay.
And yeah, and finally. Was your shirt open before?
I don't remember.
What's wrong?
I don't remember.
Well, you don't seem like you're into this.
No, we'll do it. We'll do this thing.
We can argue. We can have this argument about how long.
There was no argument. And finally, an Australian jockey has fallen off his horse and died, and no one cared.
That's not how you did it. You didn't read it like a joke on there. You were like,
and no one fucking cares.
Yeah, no one fucking cares about this.
And finally, an Australian jockey has fallen off his horse and died, and no one fucking cares about it.
Don't act. Do what you just...
And finally, an Australian jockey has fallen off his horse and died, and no one fucking cares. So we got a great show for you today.
That's not how you did it.
How did I do it?
You read it like there's no joke written, and because that's what you did. And lastly, an Australian jockey has fallen off his horse, died. Nobody gives a shit. Let's get started. The Adam Friedland Show, you know, like that.
And lastly, an Australian jockey has fallen off his horse and died, and no one gives a shit. Let's get started. It's the Adam Friedland Show. We got a good...
Hold on a second, Adam.
What?
Let's, what was the Australian jockey? I think we should stay on that one.
We didn't really have a joke for it, though.
I mean, there's so much there. It's so rich.
He's Australian.
He's Australian.
He's small.
He's
Jockeys
jockey.
are small.
He's
Yeah.
tiny. It's
Okay.
Australia. It's a man being killed by wildlife. It's the tapestry.
They
of
die
it is-
from animals a lot there.
As a personal favor to me, I would like there to be something about this jockey.
Okay. He's survived by his horse.
No, see, no ironic stuff. There's got to be. Look, we need a good monologue joke, and this is sort of the. This is like the perfect. This is the perfect storm of things. Something about Christopher Reeves, perhaps. They're calling him the Christopher Reeves of Australia. And not because he fell off a horse, but because he's a tiny man who probably lives in Smallville.
Smallville's good because
a jockey would live in a place called Smallville.
Smallville because he's small.
Because he's tiny.
Yeah.
And so it's misdirection.
Okay.
So the audience hears that and they think, oh, why? Because he fell off a horse? And then we go the other direction. No, because he's tiny and he lives in Smallville.
Because he's probably from Smallville.
Because he's probably from Smallville. Try that.
Okay.
Less soft talking also.
In what do you mean? Why are you on about this soft talking?
There's a lot of soft talking.
All right. An Australian jockey died this week, tragically, after dying during a race.
No,
people are calling.
No, in Australia, in the audience.
Okay, and finally, an Australian jockey has fallen off his horse and died in what people are calling an Australian Christopher Reeves. Not because he's Superman, but because he's probably from a place called Smallville.
Dave, do you think that's funny?
Don't ask Dave. He doesn't know comedy.
Okay, let's go a different direction. What if he becomes the horse?
It's like surrealist or something? I don't know.
No, maybe there's a way that could happen. Maybe the horse fell off him. A Catherine the Great situation. Let's go back. Let's go back.
Okay.
Let's reverse course.
All right.
A jockey has fallen off a horse.
Yes.
What's the funny part? That he's Australian, that he's a jockey, or it's a horse?
I thought you want to synthesize all of that.
I know, but let's isolate the one that's the funniest.
Well, jockeys are always on horses. We know that.
Yeah.
Okay? So it's an Australian jockey who tragically died on a horse.
Maybe something about the horse having a pouch.
Yeah. Yeah, he fell out of the horse's pouch.
He fell out of the horse's pouch.
Yeah.
When asked what he was doing in there in the first place, I'm looking for my tiny Australian clothes.
An Australian jockey has fallen off his horse and died. The horse was carrying him in his pouch, and when asked what he was, how would they ask him what he was doing in there? How would they ask him if he's died? He died on the scene.
That's the one. We're going with that one.
Okay, Dave, stop sneezing. You got to take care of your health, Dave.
He's laughing. He's laughing.
And finally, An Australian jockey has fallen off his horse and died. He was riding in the horse's pouch. When asked what he was doing in there from heaven, when he was being interviewed in heaven, he said, I was trying to find my tiny clothes.
My tiny Australian
My
clothes.
tiny Australian. Dave, steady the camera, please. And finally, an Australian jockey has fallen off his horse and died. He was, of course, riding in the horse's pouch. When asked what he was doing in there, he remarked, I was looking for my tiny Australian clothes because I'm a jockey and I'm Australian.
Don't explain the joke to people. They'll get it. A good joke doesn't need to be explained.
You're right. And finally, an Australian jockey has fallen off his horse and died. Of course, he was riding in the horse's pouch. When asked what he was doing in the horse's pouch, he said, I was looking for my tiny Australian clothes. Folks, we got a great show for you tonight.
Perfect.
Who's excited? Great show for you tonight.
Perfect.
Stay tuned. We got a lot of big things. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely perfect.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate that. Thank you.
If you can't write the joke about the joke. And it gives Ginsberg some work to do.
Okay.